Welcome to the latest episode and part of the latest series in Werewolf the Podcast. We're on episode 117. You need to listen to the previous few episodes to kind of know where you are at this moment. It's all been happening. You need to go back to at least 112 to try and work out what's going on. And I mean, I could go into what's happened, but that would be a waste of half the show and people would get pissed off. The description down there, see that righty bit, has so many things to discover in it, social media and all that shit. There's books by me, Greg, and other authors, and yeah, just go down there and have a look. You might want to join us on social media and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that kind of bollocks. Also, there's a very important link there because there's one way you can show us your love by buying us a coffee. It's £2 or $2 or something. Just go and do it, yeah? Why? Because it's a nice thing to do. You've got all these episodes free. Yeah. Anyway, so let's get back into the story. Back to Wil. What do you do when you've almost been trapped by someone or something? Well, the idea is now that I should keep my head down and simply kind of, I suppose, disappear into the background of the world. As you probably realise, that's not really me in any way. Now it was time to be a cunt. No, that's too little. I want to be the king of cunts. The main thing in life is having fun, right? Which would be so much fun to find out what was happening. Okay. Let us begin with the fucking creepy fishy folk that had tried to fuck me up that night. They were going to get it now. Whoever wanted to catch me would not expect me to throw myself into as much trouble as possible. That is, unless they knew an awful lot about me and knew that is what I would do. Fuck it, who cares? I don't second guess anyone, I fucking just do shit. I'd asked Malcolm to work out where these hippie fucks lived. It's an incredible thing that what a nerd can do with just a fucking number plate of a car. He'd sent me shitloads of information on them, and I have to say, I had read fuck all, apart from the fact that it lived on a houseboat that was moored permanently to a quay on an island in the Thames called Tag Island. The houseboat was pretentiously called the Pequod. The only other bit of information is that they had 2 kids, and that was the inn, I think. I like people with kids. For some reason, if you target the little ones, it changes everything. From Sally, I'd learned that these smelly, slimy twats were spirits of water or whatever. They were things called nixies, and that they were fairy folk or something. Normally, they were like bad fairy folk who liked to drown people. We would have gone. They were shapeshifters like me and would lure people to the water's edge and then kill them to be consumed in their own time. I have to admit, they'd owned me in that fight that I'd had with them the other night, and if it weren't for Sally, then I would have been fucked, to be honest. They'd done horrific things to me even when in my werewolf form, which was super worrying, as usually nothing fucks with me when I am in a werewolf form. I think it was just because they caught me by surprise. They had now to deal with my surprise that I was going to give them. I had survived. I had learned. I was now a threat. What does not kill us makes us stronger, and all that bollocks. If the folks who tried to trap me were working for them, then I had even more reason to do the killing and the murdering thing that I love to do so much. I mean, I now had an enemy. I don't often get a proper enemy to fight. Normally I just pick my targets and then they're my victims. Well, I suppose I did pick the nixie things as victims at first, but I didn't know they were those nasty fishy things. They had fought back, which meant they had to die. They had dinted my ego, which was something I could definitely not allow. Sula, the detective lady, had dented it too, a little. So I would do this shit to reinflate it to the instant hot air balloon size it should have been. I would catch up with Sula and co in the near future. I was pretty sure. Ben. Fuck. He'd gone, and a sense of failure overtook us. The 2 detectives with us had wandered out at Sula as the men had left. They wondered why we'd not followed the target. They couldn't see the The giant fucking wolf sat watching all what was happening. Its huge head swept between the three of them and myself. It was fucking terrifying. What could we do against it? Nothing. We couldn't hurt it, we couldn't touch it. We just had to wait for it to go away. Just because, she told him. Sula was depressed and anxious. She'd revealed herself to one of the most dangerous things we knew existed. She turned towards me and took out her earpiece and started to speak. I couldn't tell her that there was an invisible wolf just sat there watching them before they gave me away 100%. That was... The rest of the people in the room just continued as though life was completely going on as normal. She motioned me over to her. So looking at the wolf, I walked over to her. This was not so easy. I had to skirt around the room, so I did not go through the wolf. I didn't want to walk through the fucking thing. The three detectives were conversing when I arrived and took a seat. I tried to put into conversation, but it was difficult as their heads were together and they were ranting away. I eventually touched Sula's shoulder and got her attention. She looked at me confused. What? She spat. I tried to whisper and turn away from the ghosty thing. It's still here and listening and looking at us, I told her. She went into silence. The two guys were obviously confused. Sula lifted her hands so that they went into silence. She shook her head when they wanted to ask questions. We need to be quiet. Someone has a listening device here, she told him. The waiter came to the table and was confused about how things had altered, but Sula gave him the £20 note and smiled. Keep the change. He said his thank yous and then wandered away from the silent four sitting at the table. People are strange, he thought, I could tell. Fuck. We had to find out what he was fucking doing right now. What would he be fucking doing right now? We sat in awkward silence as the wolf soul sat and stared at us. We were there for at least 10 minutes. Then the thing just turned and walked out of one of the walls. It was gone. Fuck! Well, so what did I know about these things on this island? They had integrated into the human population. Could they be a little like myself in that they integrated and took from the plethora of humans when they needed what they needed? They had jobs, hobbies, and kids. Who the fuck knew? I knew that they died only if you poked them with iron. This was a wonderful bit of information. I could kill them with something, which was always good. I knew that they could not cope with good, unfairy music. Apparently good tunes injured them in some way. That was interesting. Maybe an ideal route for torture. I love torture. They were stronger than me. I don't like to admit it, but they were much stronger than I was, even as a werewolf. That meant my usual physical way of dealing them would kind of have to be altered. They were vegans in human form. Another reason to fuck them up. And they ate rotting human flesh when they were beasties. They would be out at a yogurt weaving class or something tonight until 9:30 p.m. and someone called Divya would be babysitting until then. Hopefully Divya was just a normal human. That would make life so much easier for me. But if she was something else, I would have the fun of challenge of killing it. So, it was on like Kong. Packing for the job took me a few moments. Some of the items were somewhat specialised for the task and hard to get hold of. Iron railroad spikes at the last minute are not a usual thing, but Malcolm had found me some, and I couldn't fucking wait to use them. Fenrir then bimbled in through the wall from his journey and sat and watched what was going on. Those are the police then, Fen? I asked. Yeah. Did you listen to what was going on? He replied. I kept packing as we chatted. Yeah, I think we need to cause as much trouble as we can, as quickly as we can, so they don't get a chance to stop us, I said. He nodded. Let's go kill some fucking fish, he laughed. I arrived at the island about 8 p.m. It has a little bridge that you cross to get onto Tag Island itself. The community there was somewhat boho riche, I think that's what you say, and probably consumes more brown rice and lentils per head, here than in any other part of London. I parked my car a good mile from the venue of tonight's fun and asked Fen to go and have a check out of the site. It's good. As you know, Fen is my invisible wolf soul, my bestest, beastiest friend. He would be able to cover the distance in minutes and check out the scene of tonight's murder with great detail. The other fantastic thing about the wolf soul is that I can see the world through his eyes. This means that we have the ability to both check out what is going on. So it's unlikely that we'll miss any clever set-up shit. He set off and jogged his way down Hampton Court Road. I watched him leave. It's always amazing to see him run off into the distance. I mean, he's a big fucking wolf in the world. He doesn't really fit in with the environment. As he was lost in the distance, I dropped into his brain and we ran together until he got to the footbridge of the island where he slowed and the caution began. We have to remember that some fairy folk might be able to see him. Most can't, but some can. So in this case, discretion was the better part of valour, as we didn't want to spoil this evening's class in killing the fae. He wandered over the bridge as a couple walked the other way, chatting about someone called David Matthews and his New York work being exhibited at some place somewhere. There was no obvious watching of the island going on. There was one CCTV camera. Who knew if there were any observers at the time? We were both sort of trained in this shit. We'd been in the army, so we would have, or should have, noticed anything really obvious. I mean, you always run risks when you're going, to do these things. You might miss shit, but I like to gamble. I always start with, the 3 aces up my sleeve of me being a werewolf. After the Pequod had been identified and thoroughly checked out, I got out of the car and started walking towards the island of Tag. I was well wrapped up with a beanie and a heavy hold-all. It had all the toys that I would employ for this creature's torture. It was heavy because contents were, mainly iron items. Fen had found the kids' room. He'd checked out the rest of the boat and was sitting watching the Indian woman on the couch as she ate a giant packet of Wotsits. I wandered over the little bridge, nodding to the one CCTV camera we had noticed as I crossed. I wanted the authorities to know exactly who had done this shit. I don't know how I could get in trouble for killing monsters, but I'm sure that they would come after me for it. In reality, they were already after me, but the footage would rub their nose in this shit. Torture would be spread to them watching. They'd caused it. I started walking around the island, and it smelt of all the usual hippie stuff, weed, patchouli, and body odour. Finding the boat, I took my beanie off, presented my biggest smile and prepared for the babysitter to open the door. Typically, that smile was enough to knock a heterosexual older woman off her feet. I've been told it has a slight effect on those of other descriptions as well. I wandered through the well-maintained garden to the green door on the floating boat. As I knocked, a light went on and I watched through Fenrir's eyes in the boat as the lady in her late 30s put on her slippers and slipped from the couch where she'd been watching videos on her phone. She made her way in an oversized hoodie, chewing the last mouthful of a packet of Wotsits before she checked the peephole. Watching her body language change as she saw me through the peephole was pretty funny. She quickly wiped her hand on her shorts, checking them for remnants of Wotsits before straightening her hair in the hallway mirror. She checked herself out, looking herself up and down, turning this way and that before being happy with what she was presented. She started towards the door before running back to the mirror, where she checked her teeth were clean comprehensively. Eventually, when happy, she walked to the door in a seductive strut, lifting the hoodie to reveal her bottom a little more to the world. "Hi, who is it, please?" she shouted so I could hear her. My name's Alex. John left his gi at BJJ yesterday and asked if I would not mind dropping it off on my way home, I told her. The door opened and in the crack formed, Davinia stood and took up what she hoped would be a provocative pose, batting her eyelids. I did the dashing hero look, looking at the floor and raising my eyes to her. As I saw her, I smiled as if in appreciation of her. She had a last life thrill as I grabbed her by the throat and started to crush, lifting her and carrying her back into the boat. She wiggled and kicked as I choked her in my grasp. Her hands went to mine. She was scratching at them as she fought pathetically for life. How life changes in a moment. Well, hers did definitely, as she was pretty, much dead now. She thankfully had made no noise as I crushed. She was probably unable to do so, and she soon went limp in my hand. I held on for a little longer to make sure she was properly dead. I placed her on the floor. I like a good throat crush to get rid of someone when I want no evidence. There had been no blood or snot, so there was nothing to clean up, nothing to give any clues as to her death on this spot at that moment. I'd lifted her off the floor so that she'd not knocked anything over or left any signs of a struggle as she wiggled. I carefully closed the door, turned off the light, and lifted the cooling body under one arm and made my way towards the baby's bedroom. It was on the ground floor, full of course, wooden and hemp toys. No plastic here. Poor little bastards. No Buzz Lightyear. I placed the body behind the door before looking around a little more. Wow, that rhymed. There were 2 baby bed cribby things together in the centre of the room, and in them was something or things or something. I suppose it was I don't know. It was not a human smell that permeated the room. It was like rotting flesh and damp. It was super weird. The cots were white and wooden and did have very young children inside them. Less than a year, I guess. The noises coming from the cribs were the burbles of human infants, and when I leaned over the cribs, I saw 2 babies in bundles with little woolly hats on. I reached out for the one in the yellow hat as it moved slightly and lightly on the mattress. "Coochie coo," I cooed, tickling its little belly. I have to say, I was a bit disappointed. I kind of hoped that the Nixie's babies, because they were water spirits, would be like little baby tadpoles or something, swimming around in a little pool or something. Nah, they were just normal, boring babies. I squatted down to unzip my bag and get something from it. I'd brought something that I thought would be some fun in the suffering of the fish folk. I brought out a large plastic container that was really heavy for its size. I unscrewed the jar as I stood up over the cots. The lid finally came off and I looked at the 2 sprogs in the cribs. They started to wiggle and become more motile as I opened the container. That was interesting. Could they sense its contents? I moved the jar towards one of them and it started to gristle and cry. Ew. As I took it away, it calmed slightly. Wow, this was fun. I called over Fen, who was keeping an eye out of the window, and did the same thing again to get the same result. He laughed in my head. "Go on then, you know you fucking want to," he said. I smiled and acted like a child getting to do something slightly naughty and exciting. I poured some of the powder into my gloved hand. Just like a large pinch soupçon, and took it over to the first baby's head. I then dusted my hands down over the infant. The iron filings landed as a thin layer over the, now, with its touch, half creature, half human thing's head. It was a sickening mix of human and slimy fucking fish thing. It made me feel a little queasy, to be honest. I had seen some horrific things, but this was truly yucky. The screams that went along with this horror transformation were incredible, like nothing I'd ever heard before in my life. They gave me chills, like claws being dragged over a slate floor. It gave me that funny spine tingle thrill when something's in pain. Where the iron filings had landed, the thing was starting to break down into like a foamy slime, like have you ever put salt on a slug? Yeah, it was dissolving, and as it did so, the other one was going fucking nuts, the other baby, I mean. The noise was so intense, it was unbelievable. The other child actually started to crawl and move away from its sibling. I laughed. This was incredible. Look at how the dissolving one was now changing. It formed like a snotty, bubbly surface as it broke down, and it collapsed from solid to what looked like, overly slimy snot. I think it was dead at this point. The other baby was now doing me fucking head in, it was so loud. So I reached into my bag again and got a railroad spike from it. They're hefty things and not very sharp, so I wondered how I was going to use them on this little tiny thing. I initially touched its cheek with the top of the spike and its keening got even more intense. The spot where it touched bubbled and stank for a moment. It was like pouring acid on something. I then grabbed the baby and unswaddled it, laying it on its back and baring its chest. It was pretty strong for its size. It tried to grab onto my finger. I held the wiggling thing with one hand as I slowly pressed the spike's sharper end onto the baby's chest. It wasn't sharp at all. It shouldn't have done what it did, but Where it touched, it dissolved the flesh, allowing the spike to kind of sink deeper into the meat and the chest. It could do nothing but complain and die, the poor wee thing. It took a while as the iron slowly burnt its way through the creature. I mean, hot knife through butter would have been the overused expression to describe it. Eventually, the spike's tip hit the mattress with a thud and the infant stopped moving. The whole spike was through it, and the hole it had created had got wider as the flesh receded from it. It was incredible to watch. It was fucking mad. I removed the spike from its chest and wiped it clean with the stupid little yellow beanie hat before casting it aside. This was great. So this shit worked, and Mummy and Daddy would be home soon. Let's see what this shit can do to them. This was fun. We waited. Fen then noticed the Prius as it pulled up to the front of the garden. "They're here," he told me. I love the excitement that these moments bring. It's always reminds me of the first time you ever have sex. You lose your virginity in these moments. The sex is great, but do you know what? The anticipation of it is often better. The people-shaped Nixies got out of the car. As usual, they were in full argument. That kind of meant that they were distracted, so that's a good thing. And I don't think that they would have noticed Fen if he would have been tap dancing on their porch, to be honest. They wandered up the path, got to the door and opened it, and came in, still arguing as they went into the lounge. There was no babysitter. The argument stopped, and the two people started sniffing around on their hands and knees and moving weirdly like dogs. It was really strange. They shouted for the woman, Davinia. "Davinia, Davinia, Davinia, where are you?" No reply. Obviously, she's dead. They sniffed again and looked confused at each other. Maybe they could sense another smell in the boat. Fen was watching them. They couldn't see him, thank fuck. They carefully made their way towards the bedroom. They were making a weird keening noise, and I assumed it was made out of distress. I waited by the door, ready for the first one to walk through it. Fen ripped into me. Normally I would just, then rip them to shreds as a werewolf. That was how it normally went, but I would have to do things differently in this case. In one paw, I had a spike, and in the other, I had the container with the iron filings. The door opened and the woman rushed through. The metal spike smashed into her forehead, and it just stuck there. I let go of the spike and watched as the creature transformed into the fishy fucking thing and screamed as it reached for the spike. It was stuck between its two fucking huge fishy eyes, and it was just bubbling away and yeah. It fell to the floor and started writhing about as its flesh seemed to rot and foam around the iron spike in its skull. I span as quick as I could with the other hand containing the jar of iron filings, swinging it towards the head of the other, what was now a creature. It was too fast and it just reached for my wrist, stopping it dead in its arc. My shoulder stopped so quickly that it actually hurt. Not a normal thing from my werewolf form. I now punched with the other empty hand. The Nixie also caught that at the wrist just before it hit its face. Ah, shit. It was such perfect timing. The fist was actually held more or less like an inch away from those big, round, fishy eyes. Its big, slobbery, fang-filled face smiled at me. I could sense it felt victory in that moment. That was the mistake, by the thing. I opened my held fist, extending my fingers and letting the clawed tips rip into the eyeball. I'm so fucking good at this shit. It was perfect. The creature let go of both my wrists, covering its face and turning away. Oh dear, this creature was not used to fighting. It wasn't used to being hurt. It was used to killing all comers. It was used to having no competition during altercations. This may have been the first time its prey had ever hurt it. Well, I'd been its victim. Now it was mine. It felt a bit pathetic using iron filings as a weapon. I emptied the pot in my hand and grabbed the shoulder of the now cowering creature, turning it and slapping its hands away from its face with my empty paw. I then rubbed the iron filings into the screeching creature's face, and it bubbled and burnt the flesh on that face, its two giant eyes collapsing inwards to the orbits of its skull. The other one on the floor had stopped convulsing. I assume it was dead. I stamped on its head a few times, crushing it into goo. It should be dead now, should it not? Well, I suppose we'll see. The smell of the creatures was foul, sewage and rot. The ooze that came out of them. Well, it wasn't blood. It was like dissolved ooze and was black, and it caught at the back of your throat. It was a horrific stink. My senses, as you can imagine, are pretty powerful, so it was horrendous. It was almost too much to take. The other facially injured Nixie was now rolling on the floor. You could see and feel it was in agony as it just continued to break down and devolve and rot under those iron filings that were spread there on its head. We stood over it now, me and Fen as one. This was so enjoyable. So fucking enjoyable. Watching the fishy folk burn. Fuck fishy fucking fairy folk. The keening and the wailing and the wiggling started to slow from our friend. This thing might be dying, so I would have to get on with the torch or it would be too late. I knew I had an ice pick and some iron and steel items in the bag. Now it would be choosing with what to play first. I've never filleted a Nixie. Thanks for listening. That's the end of the episode. Bye.